The opening antiphon of Mass told us to rejoice. Now, normally, when we think of the word rejoice, we're generally going to think of some type of a party or reception, maybe something like we're accustomed to this time of year. Throughout the month of December, the long list of social engagements that normally feature rather scrumptious food and a lot of drink. This is not the year for that kind of rejoicing. And in fact, the rejoice that the church calls us to has nothing to do with the banquets and feasts and wonderful buffets that we're accustomed to. When the church calls us to rejoice, the church calls us to the first reading, to the prophet Isaiah, who tells us, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bring glad tidings to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives and release to the prisoners." Now, these may not seem like major reasons to rejoice, but joy that comes from God doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be smiling and laughing all the time. Joy, which comes from the Lord, is what sustains us in hope and strength at all times, and especially as we continue, and I can see it in all of your eyes. You're just a little tired. You're feeling a little broken, and you're feeling a bit anxious. But joy tells us we have no need for anxiety. Remember that introduction to the first reading. Isaiah is talking to a people who are broken. These are people who returned to a land that they were not born in because the exile lasted 70 years. This is a generation, maybe even a second generation, born in captivity, born in a different land and now sent back, go back to your homeland, by a new regime. Not only were they sent back to their homeland, they're told, go back and restore the temple, restore the way of worship. And what do they find? They find a temple that's been desecrated and completely torn down. So they're sent to a great deal of work. And not only is the temple in disarray, the whole city is still in disarray. And of course, if the city is in disarray, do you think the bounteous crops and the fields and the terraces are in good shape? No. These are people whose way of life was decimated. And yet, Isaiah preaches hope and a year of favor. Not because everything is going swimmingly and well, but because the Spirit of the Lord releases us from the captivity of sin. There's nothing worse than being trapped by sin and fear and anxiety. For many years of my own life, I had to watch my mother, who suffered from manic depression, fall into deep depression and literally be trapped. Not once or twice, but several times in my life, I would come home and she would be trapped in the chair, unable to move. Joy and hope tell us we have nothing to fear. What's the worst thing that can happen to us? What's the absolute worst thing? Well, let's face it, death, right? But death isn't the end. We are called to rejoice because Jesus rose from the dead. And even Deacon Al put on rose this morning. We are called to rejoice because the Lord gives us the faith and hope and the gift to persevere even when the way forward seems a bit cloudy and uncertain. We're called to rejoice because God is with us. Emmanuel. We're not rejoicing because a vaccine is being delivered today as we speak. We're not rejoicing because the numbers seem a little bit safer. In fact, most of you probably have someone in your family, as I do, who's currently COVID positive. We're rejoicing not because everything's going the way we want and we can throw big parties and huge gatherings. We rejoice because the Spirit of the Lord is upon us. And as the light grows brighter in our Advent wreath, we continue to lose the light of the sun for another week or so. But the light of Christ and the hope which we have in Him sets us free from all anxiety. It may not feel as if we could throw our heads back and dance, but the joy of the Lord is what sustains us. The Spirit of the Lord is upon us to be a sign to all those trapped in their homes, trapped in their hospital rooms, trapped by ever-increasing demands from jobs. The Spirit of the Lord sends us forth to rejoice. And while we may have to cover our smile with our mask, the light of Christ shines brightly as we say amen. For it is the Christ Himself who fills us in this Eucharist. It is Christ Himself who is the feast that has not been taken away from us and is the reason we continue to hope and to long for whatever comes next. Because Christ, the gift of His presence, Emmanuel, God is with us. Rejoice. And I will say it again. Rejoice always in the Lord, for He has been so good and will continue to guide us, to lead us, and to sustain us. No matter what wind, wave, snow, ice, pandemic comes our way. For He has faced down the worst of our fears, and the grave remains empty. After all, Jesus rose from the dead. And I'd wear pink every day if it helped you to remember that truth, that basic and most profound reason that we never lose hope and we never lose our joy. For at all times, in all seasons, and under all conditions, we can rejoice because the Spirit of the Lord makes it so.